Without fail, every time I explore a new cemetery, I find something completely fascinating. A new interesting grave or some remnant of the past. Even in cemeteries that I've explored before, like this one. Today I am in St Peter's Cemetery in Aberdeen, and we're going to go looking for a grave marker of a war hero, a sailor who died aboard the Titanic, and a very famous poet. This has been a place of worship and memory for hundreds of years, many hundreds more than the surviving memorials record. The oldest part of this burial ground is the Spital. Founded in 1168, it was once the site of a medieval hospital dedicated to St Peter, where old priests and the poor came for food and shelter. The name Spital, a local reference and shortening of the word hospital. All that remains are the ruins of St Peter's Chapel, which was once one of several buildings. The Spital Kirkyard was open for burials from 1767 to 1894. Some of the grave markers bear symbols of memento mori, indicating their age. There were two later additions to what is now a fairly large burial ground. The Southern Division opened in 1874 and the West Division in 1884. Most people will enter the cemetery through the gates in these sections and find themselves greeted with a skull and crossbones and a Latin phrase that translates as "not for oneself, but for all." These aren't just words. The cross of sacrifice, found in many cemeteries where Commonwealth soldiers, sailors and airmen killed in the First and Second World Wars are interred, highlights that. There are 62 Commonwealth war graves throughout the cemetery, dedicated to those who arguably lived and died by such a motto. The cemetery itself was even hit by bombs during the Blitz in the Second World War, although you wouldn't know it. That said, the recent storm has certainly had a bit of an impact on the cemetery's trees. Resting against a wall near the cross of sacrifice is a particularly interesting grave, that of John Perie. He was awarded the Victoria Cross, which he received for his actions during the Crimean War on the 18th of June 1855. He was suffering from a musket wound in his side, but showed great courage, commitment and compassion. He volunteered to go over the wall with his lieutenant to rescue a wounded sailor who was lying in the open. He was buried in a communal pauper's grave in 1874, which they referred to as Stranger's Land. Aberdeen's branch of the Royal Engineers erected this memorial in 2001. It can be a little sad to remember or even realise that many of those buried in cemeteries, even those that did great deeds in service of others, often have no memorial. But it's not just the memorial that might be absent. Memorials dedicated to those lost at sea are a common sight in historic cemeteries. Here in St Peter's, there's one dedicated to the memory of James Fraser. Not a fictional outlander character, James Fraser was a real person, an Aberdonian. On the 6th of April 1912, he was in Belfast, where he signed on board the unsinkable ship, the Titanic. When the ship sank in the North Atlantic off the coast of Newfoundland, he was lost, aged 29. His body, if recovered, was never identified. There's actually a really sad twist of fate attached to this story. His son, born 1910, also named James, was a member of the Royal Navy and was during the Second World War. On January the 31st, 1942, he was aboard the HMS Belmont when it was torpedoed off the coast of Newfoundland. The entire 138 crew of the destroyer were all lost, including James, aged 29. Poetry and death go hand in hand, and it just so happens that up in the Spital, there is a monument dedicated to the memory of a famous Scottish writer, John Burness, a relative of the Scottish poet Robert Burns. He wrote the poetic tale, Trummy Cap, a legend of Castle Fiddles, Cap, if I'm pronouncing that right, encounters a ghost doppelganger and steals the deeds to a castle. It's about as Scottish a story as there could be. Exactly where his grave is unknown, not uncommon in historic cemeteries. In fact, it's the same situation for the grave of our Victoria Cross recipient. Sometimes a body is missing, misplaced, or just its exact whereabouts not quite known. Monuments may be gone or never even there to begin with, and still there are stories and memories attached to each and every one, and they continue as long as we keep looking for them. War heroes, lost sailors, forgotten poets, and everyday people can be found in rows and quiet corners, never really gone so long as someone is still willing to go look.